welcome to our live training today. Today we have the honor of having two guests, both licensed therapists. We have Kailey and Caitlin from Consider Yourself Counseling in St. Charles. And they're here today to talk with us a little bit about some of the major challenges that their clients, my clients, all of the people in the world are dealing with right now, and trying to navigate through 2020 and the holidays, as well as some signs and symptoms of anxiety, depression, and stress that maybe you don't know that you're dealing with. So I like to ask you ladies, when do you usually have people seek out for your help or guidance? And what is kind of the most common thing that you see in those that you help, and how would someone know if they truly need to see a therapist?
Yes, that's an excellent place to start. So there are different warning signs or indicators of anxiety and depression. They can also be broken down into different categories. So there are cognitive warning signs, there's emotional warning signs, behavioral and physical warning signs. So we would like to start there just to kind of provide some information on what that would look like. So starting with cognitive warning signs, what to kind of keep an eye out for if it's happening with more frequency, or if it's creating more distress. That would kind of be more of the memory problems, difficulty with concentration or focus. You may even start to notice like your decision making or your judgment may be a little bit more skewed to where you may be making poor decisions or really not thinking through more of the long-term impacts of your decision making or the impact that that could have. Another key indicator would be an increase in negative thoughts or automatic negative thoughts. So these can be more of like they could race through your mind. They can be focused on more pessimistic thinking. And it can also kind of encompass more of like a consistency or a constant in worrying. So if you're noticing that there's an increase in the amount that you're spending time worrying or going through the what ifs or thinking about the worst case scenarios throughout the day, those can all be and fall under that umbrella of those cognitive warning signs that would go along with anxiety and depression too.
Mm-hmm. And Kailey really brings up a great starting point. And as she mentioned, there's a couple other areas that we can often, when we know where to look, might see these warning signs. So as she mentioned, another one is some emotional warning signs. And, some examples of this can be, moodiness. And oftentimes, that can be feeling okay, not even necessarily happy and elated, just okay, and then feeling like you're tearful. Your mood is just kind of fluctuating day to day and not knowing why necessarily. Going off of that, sometimes we feel really irritable with ourselves, with other people. We notice that we're having a short temper. And going off of that again is sometimes agitation and feeling like we have this like inability to just relax. Whether it's relax cognitively, Kailey mentioned some racing thoughts or anxious thoughts. So, sometimes even relaxing mentally is really hard for us, but also physically, just that inability to feel like you can just feel calm and content. We also really feel overwhelmed when we're anxious or depressed. So that can also be another warning sign. Overwhelmed with the amount of tasks that you have to do on a day-to-day basis. And then a big one, especially one that we've seen an increase in because of COVID and around the holidays, is this sense of loneliness and isolation. And the tricky thing with those two is we often think we can only be lonely if we're physically alone, but a lot of people feel lonely and isolated even when we're around other people, family, friends, coworkers. So it's really not just what you might see in movies where you're by yourself at home. You can really have that sense of loneliness and isolation in a multitude of ways, and as a result of that, you kind of start to feel depressed and that just general unhappiness, kind of going back to maybe what I said earlier with that moodiness and just feeling like not content, like you can't get out of a rut, perhaps. If you have with some of those cognitive warning signs and then emotional, you might realize you're starting to feel restless. And that could be lack of sleep. It could be physical kind of restlessness, and then that inability to focus on a task at hand, whether that's reading, just, morning coffee can become this big task when you're feeling like everything is hard to focus on.
Absolutely.
Awesome. These are all really, really good points. Two things I want to kind of point out that you both said. So one of the things, Kailey, you mentioned for automatic negative thoughts, this is something I hear all the time from my clients, and something that I call them, and totally steal this if you don't use it already, to crush ants. Your
Yes.
automatic negative thoughts is crushing ants.
Yep.
And which, brings us to what are the solutions and ways that you can be able to provide some structure to finding solutions that work for you. And another thing, Caitlin, that you mentioned too before about like the sense of loneliness, or even just feeling as though you're not being heard or understood.
Mhm.
And even if you're in an environment and you're with other people, if you're not feeling as though you're being valued or heard as a person, it can often feel like you're the only person in the room, even if you're in a crowd of many. I mean, there's like lots of songs about this too, right?
You're absolutely right. I mean, it really is just stomping out those ants. So those automatic negative thoughts. And there's definitely a lot of different strategies that can be incredibly helpful for each person with combating those. And the first step that's going to be the most important is really just identifying and creating more of that awareness of when these automatic negative thoughts or these ants are really happening, because they can often go overlooked. Like they can really just become more of the norm for us, where we're really not even noticing that that's what's taking place. So the first step is definitely identification, awareness. And then that's where you can pull in some strategies from cognitive behavioral therapy, which is really helpful with restructuring unhealthy forms of thought. And that is something that's a great resource with being able to work through some of these ants that you're experiencing. Absolutely.